Hey, Hawkeye fans, Chad Leistikow of the Des Moines Register, along with Tyler Tachman of the Des Moines Register. We are back into our usual Tuesday afternoon routine. It is game week, Tyler. We made it. Our plan going forward, 4:30 on Tuesday is just like last year. There might be a few weeks we have to adjust the time. A lot of that will have to do if my son has a cross-country meet. But he doesn't have many Tuesday meets this year, so we should be good. Tyler, this was our first day of media opportunities. It was supposed to start at 10:30 with Cade McNamara. He showed up about, 10:51. So he had about 4.5 minutes. So that was kind of the start to our day. But it was intriguing. And we're going to talk about three things today: what's new, what's old, and what's different. What's new? Definitely. Let's start with the depth chart. Kamari Moulton. That was probably the biggest shock of Monday's depth chart. And Ferentz was pretty funny today. He's like, I thought that might get your attention. It did get our attention, and we're all talking about it. And happened. Look at you, all the planning that you've done. You talked to Kamari on Media Day and never used it. So you are ready to roll with a Kamari Moulton story. Let's learn about Kamari Moulton, Iowa's starting running back.
I just had a feeling back at Media Day. I was like, I just
Like
had
a head coach thing, like a gut feel that Kirk Ferentz talks about.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. I had a feeling, but yeah, he's a guy that we've heard has been rising in what's a really good running back room. But I think it was a little bit surprising for him to rise that much to get that one line, and part of that might be due to the fact that Leishon Williams has missed some time during the fall, and it seems like now he's doing okay. He's back. He's been back practicing, but so maybe Leishon is one if he had been healthy in the entire lead up to the season. But still, it speaks to the growth and kind of development that Kamari Moulton has made. And he's entering his redshirt sophomore or freshman season. Excuse me. So it's like he's a really young guy, and it was interesting just kind of talking to, he wasn't available today to talk, but some of his teammates of Kamari he's put on weight. We've known that, like good weight, good size, but he's not like the biggest guy in stature. He's not a Caleb Johnson type. But what it does sound like he does really well is get in and out of cuts, kind of maybe slither through holes that might not even really look like holes. So that seems like is something that he kind of brings to the table as maybe a little bit of a smaller guy, but can kind of make some magic, and it is a little bit shifty in terms of just how he moves on the field.
Yeah, when we had Liddell Betts on in the summer, that was a guy that really stood out in that interview. Just that he had put on that weight. He's 5'9", 197. I would say he looks a little taller than that to me. I don't know if they're underselling the 5'9", but his stats last year: 27 carries for 93 yards. Of course, we remember he had the pair of touchdowns against Western Michigan. So that was really the only time we heard from him all year. And then he did rise up a little bit where he got a few carries, I believe, in the bowl game, right? I think. And it's just one of those stories that you're intrigued about. I mean, it's a big deal. I mean, Caleb Johnson, who led the team in rushing as a freshman, true freshman, is on the depth chart, and he's third on the depth chart behind Leishon Williams. Now, Caleb is returning kickoffs, but, I think a lot of people are wondering, what does that mean for Caleb Johnson? But my answer would be, I think it's more of a reflection of what Kamari Moulton has done and has proven during fall camp. And I think it's a good sign that Tim Lester and his staff, we know Liddell Betts, is willing to go with the best player. We've seen that time and time again. But I think it's just a good sign that Tim Lester has fresh eyes. He knows what he's looking for in his offense. And he talked about on our podcast, he needs a running back that can run their specific plays that unlock everything. And of course, I believe he's probably talking about an outside zone type of run, and where it is on the running back to read the cutback lanes. And, that's something with, that Liddell talked about with Kamari, is he's good at finding those creases and getting positive yards. So it'll be really interesting on Saturday to see how much of a workload Kamari gets. But how much of a splash he can make in that role, because it does seem like he's going to be out there for the first carry. I can't imagine they'd put him on the one line and not give him the first carry of the season.
And the other thing, it feels a little similar to last season where Leishon kind of really rose up in that room. Like he wasn't necessarily a guy that stuck out, leading up to that point. But Kirk Ferentz had said how good of a lead up to the last season he had, and it came to fruition. He had the best season of his college career. It feels like a similar sense with Kamari Moulton. He's a lot younger than Leishon was going into last season, but a guy that is just consistently, we've heard his name over the last several months. And it's like how good Iowa's running back room is you're not even talking about Jazz Patterson, and he's a guy that actually made an impact last season, especially in the Iowa State game. And he, on the pre-fall camp depth chart and now the week 1 depth chart, he hasn't even been on it. He's not even on the 1, 2, or 3 line.
Right.
So I think it's a little jarring to see Caleb Johnson on the 3 line, because you look at him and being he could have a breakout season. He could be, if he can put it together, he could be one of the better running backs in the Big Ten. And he's listed 3rd on Iowa. So that, I think, is also an indication of the fact that just because Kamari's 1, just because Leishon's 2, just because Caleb is 3, doesn't mean maybe the carries are necessarily going to be distributed in that sense. If Caleb Johnson is rolling, it would be shocking to not see Liddell Betts and Tim Lester give him the ball. So I think it's a really good problem to have, because you have a lot of really talented guys, and if the O-line is moving like you want them to, you probably just feed the hot hand. So this is the starting point, I guess. And my point is, just because Kamari Moulton's on the one line doesn't mean he's going to get 95% of the carries. It's probably going to be a collection of guys.
For sure, it will be a committee, I think, especially in this first game. But it's definitely fascinating. It's fascinating. It's very unlike Iowa to have something where a freshman jumps 2 veterans. Basically the last 2 seasons leading rushers, and is atop the depth chart. So very exciting. We're going to stick with the what's new portion on offense here and go with wide receiver, because the depth chart came out with, I think, what we expected at receiver. At least I expected Jacob Gill to be on the 1 line, and he is, with Caleb Brown suspended for this game. Your 3 starting receivers as listed. Now, they may start out with 2 tight ends and 2 receivers, but I believe that the 2 guys they trust the most right now are Caden Weechin and Jacob Gill, and then Jarrett Bowie is the other starting receiver. He's your X. So between Gill and the backup X, Tyler, I think that might be your top 4 right now, and that's true freshman Reese Vanderzee, who I have heard a lot of buzz about in fall camp. 6'4", 207 is where they have him listed, and that's an intriguing name. He stood out on the Kids Day scrimmage. That's what you're looking for, playmakers. And again, I think it underscores, Lester's looking for guys that, he's got a fresh set of eyes here. He's making decisions based on what he's seen. And obviously he has seen some good things from Reese Vanderzee. So I'm excited to see Gill on Saturday, Bowie on Saturday, and Vanderzee on Saturday. And Weechin, frankly.
Yeah. And Terrell Washington Jr. as another kind of gadget guy. But Vanderzee you mentioned Kids Day. He went vertical for a catch. That kind of stood out, was one of maybe the better offensive plays of the day. But it just speaks to just what Kirk Ferentz has said about how young and unproven of a group this is. Seth Anderson has been really kind of, it seemed like he's been dealing with injuries, not just leading up to this season, but last season as well. Caleb Brown is suspended. So it's interesting to see maybe who emerges in game 1. If Jarrett Bowie's a guy that we've heard good things about, like you said, Weechin. The other thing is, I would be surprised if Iowa throws the ball a lot. This seems like a game where you kind of let the running game and offensive line impose their will, and maybe not show too much of the passing game ahead of the Iowa State game. Keep some stuff in your back pocket. You feel like if you're Iowa and you do what you need to do, you shouldn't need to throw the ball more than 15 to 20 times. And that lets whoever it is, Cade McNamara, kind of get into, you're not going to ask too much of him game 1. Let him kind of get his feet wet, get back into the rhythm of things. And speaking of quarterback, I know I'm kind of going all, all over the place here, but if I was up by 2-3 scores in the fourth quarter, I would like to see Brendan Sullivan out there. I just get him out there, get him some reps. I know there's the argument that, well, Cade probably needs as many reps as possible at this time, but I think it would be good to get Brendan Sullivan out there and let him get a little bit of work. And if the game in the third, fourth quarter is where you would expect it to be against Illinois State.
We will get to Cade and the what's old portion of our three topics here, but we're going to stick with one more what's new, which is the cornerback, TJ Hall. A little bit of a surprise atop the depth chart. That's kind of how I heard it was trending, and that's how we saw it on Kids Day. Hall did start opposite Jermari Harris and holds on to that job, basically, well, holds on, but jumped John Nestor, who had the job coming into fall camp, or out, at least was on the one line entering fall camp. Now, Nestor is the backup cash to Sebastian Castro, which is probably how they see Nestor next season, would be my guess. But, it seems like a good testament to TJ Hall. I did ask both Castro and Harris today about Hall, and sound like it was just a guy that was consistent. Consistent was the word that kept coming up with Jermari Harris. Made some plays, of course, but I think Phil Parker really looks for that consistent type of play. And TJ Hall, as I kind of wrote in the depth chart analysis, it was 2 years ago against Nebraska where he had to take over for Cooper DeJean, and it didn't go well at all against Nebraska. Now he does take over for Cooper DeJean as a starter to start the 2024 season, replacing his spot. So that's a pretty interesting development to watch. And Kirk Ferentz did address that today, and it sounded like it may not just be Harris and Hall.
It seems like a similar situation as running back in the sense that you just have healthy and good competition there. And as a result, it could be multiple guys playing there. Like when we talked to Phil Parker last week, he seemed pretty confident in, whoever, whether there was TJ Hall, Deshaun Lee, or John Nestor. And Deshaun Lee is a guy that started 6 games last season. Like you felt like he was maybe going to be as a guy that has that starting experience, as he was going to maybe be at the top of the list to get that starting spot. And then it looked like maybe John Nestor was going to be, and out of that group, it's almost like you would have thought TJ Hall would have been the least likely to get that spot. But, obviously he's done something to impress Phil Parker and Kirk Ferentz. But one thing Jermari did talk about was just, and I think Phil touched on this as well, was just the growth that TJ Hall has made. Like he's a guy that's been in the program for a while, and maybe just someone that is one of these kind of classic Iowa defensive stories of a guy that just kind of sticks behind some really good players and finds his time. And again, maybe we might see some Deshaun Lee out there. We might see John Nestor out there. I think with the injuries that Iowa's dealt with at cornerback the last couple of seasons, it's good that you feel like you have at least 3-4 guys that you feel comfortable putting out there.
Yeah, Hall listed 6'1", 187. So both he and Harris in that 6'1" range. Iowa has some length there out at cornerback. So they like that with Cooper DeJean. Obviously last year, Riley Moss, same thing. They like these tall, rangy corners. And they're going to be looking to make more plays this year than they did last year. That was one of the talking points today. All right, let's get into what's old. Obviously, the entire defense is old. Higgins, Castro, Schulte, who is a captain. Higgins is a captain. Luke Lachey, captain. And the other captain, Tyler, was, I would say, a little bit of a surprise to me. Cade McNamara is voted a game day captain. And I think that that's a big deal. That's a big deal because it does sort of cement his status in leading this team. I think it's probably going to give him more, they're going to be less likely to pull him quickly. If things are going bad, they're probably going to stick with him longer. That could be a good thing or a bad thing, but Cade McNamara was certainly a talking point today. Also last week, we haven't had a show together since Kirk talked last week about his suspension, but it sounded like last Thursday too, that Cade had made progress in Kirk's mind. And I thought you asked a great question today about the Michael Penix comparison, not in their ability, but just in terms of recovering from serious multiple injuries. And Kirk is definitely, all in here with Cade McNamara to start the season.
Yeah, the reason I brought up Penix was just because he's a guy that he was good in college, dealt with some really serious injuries, but then he kind of went to Washington and like revived his career. Like it was a total, he was one of the best quarterbacks in the country, and not that there's obviously some major differences between Cade and Michael Penix Jr., and I don't think that Cade can get to that type of level, but there are some parallels in the fact of like, does Cade kind of have a second act to his career, like just not letting two serious season-ending injuries kind of end things, because it's like you feel like now this is more than ever it's been in his college career a fork in the road, right? He had the injuries. Is this gonna be it? Is this what he is gonna ultimately be where he was had some good showings at Michigan, and then the injuries just kind of took his career away, or is he gonna be able to bounce back to show that he can come back from those serious injuries and kind of regain the form that he had at Michigan, because that's all that Iowa would really need. So I feel like that's and he said he felt healthy. That was, I think, one of the main takeaways that he said today, which we had no reason to think he wouldn't be healthy, but he said that he felt he feels very healthy. So that's question one, is can he stay healthy? Right now he is healthy. Question two is what form is he at, and will he be able to go this season?
Yeah, I remain fascinated about this quarterback situation because he did not look good on Kids Day. Brandon Sullivan wasn't much better, but it was clearly a competition, at least as it was described and as it looked. They were pretty even, and sounds like I talked to Luke Lachey for a little bit today. I know you did too, and he said Cade's gotten a lot better. And I think that's what Kirk Ferentz is banking on. I was just upstairs. I'm at my parents' house. I come here on Tuesdays, and they were just, asking me like, "Oh, is Cade doing better?" And I was like, "Well, we'll just have to see on Saturday. Like, we don't know. Like, we'll just have to kind of take him at their word right now that he has improved a little bit. But his track record at Iowa right now is 51% passer and not much production. So, and not a good Kids Day. So let's see how he does it. Obviously, he's won the locker room over, which is really that is a big deal for Kirk Ferentz. But it's going to be fascinating if the quarterback play is not good and they don't pull him, after 2-3 weeks, and it's really going. I'm really curious how that unfolds, or does he take off like we're talking about? It's such a interesting story, especially as you put it all into perspective of the fact that we're talking about the head coach being suspended because he brought this guy here. Like Kirk Ferentz has a lot invested in Cade McNamara right now, both in terms of personal, he got suspended over it, and he's getting a lot of NIL money, and the fate of this offense is resting on Cade McNamara as we speak.
Yeah, and that's why, like I said, I don't feel like it would be wise if I would ask a lot of him in week one. Like, this is a game that you can get by with just relying a lot on the run and the offensive line, that if they impose their will, this is a game Iowa should win regardless. So use this to try to build some confidence, but you don't need to ask him to do everything, and kind of let that lead into Iowa State. And on top of that, like we said, when you said, we're kind of getting ahead here, but how long of a leash does he have? This goes into the same conversation as last season of just how long Iowa kept going with Deacon Hill, and, just the evaluation, that just the disconnect between what we were seeing on the field and what Kirk Ferentz was saying. And it's like, who cares how good of or not of a practice player he was if that's the product on the field? So Iowa seems reluctant to make a move, if last season was a indication. So yeah, it will be interesting just to see kind of how willing or not Iowa will be to stick with Cade McNamara if things start to go off the rails.
Yeah, and obviously, I know most of you listening out there hope that decision never really becomes an issue at all, that he plays well. And, they beat Iowa State next week. They moved to 3-0 the next week and, go win in Minnesota the next week. But, as we've seen with Iowa football, especially on offense, it's not usually a straight line. So it'll be interesting to see how it's handled. I think Tim Lester being in the seat now instead of Kirk Ferentz's son, I think there's going to be more not pressure on Kirk Ferentz, but more, I think if Tim Lester has a strong opinion about something at quarterback, I think that will be taken into account. I mean, he was brought here for a reason. He's being paid $1.1 million a year for a reason. He knows what's going to make his offense work. And if he thinks that they need to change, I have a feeling that would influence the head coach, who happens this week to be a different head coach. And that leads us into our final segment, what's different with the head coach being Seth Wallace. We knew this. We haven't had a Hawk Central show since our emergency pod last Thursday morning. So we've heard from Kirk Ferentz now, Tyler, about his one-game suspension. We won't rehash all that. You guys have read all about it. You know all about it. Ferentz, early contact with Cade McNamara, took accountability for it, will be out for the opener as well as John Budmeyer. And now it's Seth Wallace's turn. So I spent a lot of today trying to unpack what a Seth Wallace game day looks like. The game week is going to be the same, Tyler. I mean, until the bedtime story on Friday night, which is Kirk can sometimes just drop in a little dose of humor that's just sort of funny. He's like, he said, yeah, I'll, read him a bedtime story on Friday night, and then he has to go away at like 12:01 a.m. So
it's like you don't realize the humor he's dropping until if you're not like really paying attention. Like if you're just like half paying attention, you're like, oh yeah, sure, whatever.
He's like, okay, it's like milk and cookies.
No, I wanted to know what the snack was.
Like, I know. I want to know too.
Maybe I think he likes ice cream, right? So
yeah,
but I don't know. That just like. I mean,
well,
that would be good because it's hot, but it just doesn't feel like a snack.
Yeah.
Like they're not just would they hand out bowls of ice cream? It would be a soup by the time. It would have to be like fruit snacks or something like that. I don't know.
Don't know, but it would be Friday night at the team hotel, presumably, up in Cedar Rapids. So I guess Kirk Ferentz has to leave at that point, I think. I wish I would have like asked a question to clarify that, but I'm pretty sure he has to leave the hotel, at some point Friday night, probably go back and sleep in his own bed because he's not allowed to be part of team activities as of 12:01. So presumably he'll be at home, which is very unusual. He won't be at the front of that bus. A lot of questions. I wrote about a lot of this. Check out my column at hawkcentral.com. What intrigues you most? I'll ask you, Tyler. What intrigues you most about game day without Kirk Ferentz?
Well, first I'll just say it just felt like from a lot of the people we talked to, including Kirk Ferentz, like they downplayed it a lot, which I guess you would expect. Like they didn't try to make it a big deal. And I think that's probably a good idea. But what intrigues me the most is like Kirk Ferentz mentioned, there's some things you just can't prepare for in the games. Like, and that is the type of thing that I'm interested to see the decision making of Seth Wallace if it gets to that point of like those kind of in-game adjustments. If someone's really struggling, like if Cade's struggling, do they continue to ride with him? If Iowa gets off to a really bad start, let's just say they're losing 7-0 at halftime, what's the response? Like, there's just going to be some, possibly factors that come up where it's just going to have to be in-game adjustments. And I'm interested to see that when Kirk Ferentz has been through nearly everything under the sun, as the head coach. Seth Wallace has been by his side for a lot of that, but he hasn't been the guy in the chair. So I'm interested to see if stuff goes wrong, if there's, kind of a real, I don't want to say controversial, but a meaningful decision personnel-wise to be made, how does he respond to that?
Yeah, I think Seth probably leans on Tim Lester on the offense and Phil Parker on the defense to make those types of decisions, I'm guessing. You hope your kicker isn't struggling. We have to bench your kicker like they did against Nebraska last year. That'd be tough. Don't expect that. But one of the questions I had was sort of about, do you let Seth be his own man, so to speak, as a head coach, or do you expect him to be, to perform duties as Kirk Ferentz would? And Ferentz did say he wants Seth to be himself. He doesn't want. He said he learned that a long time ago. His mentor, Joe Moore, completely different personality than Kirk. So, maybe we'll see, a little more animation on the sideline, perhaps. Maybe not. Maybe Seth will be a little more buttoned up than he typically is. He's usually pretty fiery on the sidelines, which, that's just his nature. But it does sound like to me that like decisions on fourth downs, field goals, punts, all that stuff, a lot of that gets made during their Thursday coaches and analytics meetings. So I think Seth will go into the game with a pretty good idea, of what Kirk wants to do. But he can obviously make his own call on that stuff. If it's 4th and 3 from the opposing 41-yard line, there's a lot of decisions there. Long field goal, maybe. Punt. Maybe LeVar tells him pregame, like, Reese is really cornering these punts at the 1 and 2 yard line, like, outstanding today. I like that play then. But maybe he's not. Or does he have a gut feel? Does Tim Lester, he talked to Tim Lester on the headset. Hey, I've got a great call for 4th and 3. I'd really like to go for it. Seth says go for it. I mean, that's the type of stuff we're talking about. That will be, you'd think Iowa's going to win this game, but it could be a really critical, it could be tight for a while. We don't know. We have no idea. Illinois, we're going to talk more about Illinois State on the radio show tomorrow night. They're not like a terrible team. They're a respectable FCS outfit. You talked to their coach earlier this week. So it is kind of fascinating just to see if there is a difference at all, how he handles it, how the team handles it. I think the team handles it fine because they're so veteran. That's the one thing about the suspension that I don't think will be a big factor. And I know I'm rambling here, but Ferentz did say, like, being a head coach is like all about keeping your eyes focused on the task at hand. And that's a year-round thing. And so this team is wired the right way, I think, to handle the coaching change. But obviously, tense in-game moments, does Wallace handle it differently, uniquely, and get the same results? We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, just everything Iowa dealt with last season, I felt like feels like really prepared them for this, just with all the kind of drama around the program and the fact that they were still able to win the Big Ten West. This feels like it should just be, a small bump in the road. But I think it's interesting you bring up the meter, situation, because that's where, maybe it's not that exact situation against Illinois State, but would Seth Wallace have made that call? Because that, looking back on it, that was a pretty big call to throw in Marshall Meter, who hadn't attempted to kick all season.
It's a great example. Yeah,
for Drew Stevens, who obviously was struggling, but still, you probably have confidence in him to go out there and make. But that's the type of thing where you're kind of, is Seth Wallace have the confidence to make that type of call if need be? And the other thing I think in terms of just Seth's personality is Jay Higgins, and I remember him saying this, is that Seth is very. We know the passion and kind of fire that Seth Wallace brings, but on game days, he's much more reserved. That's what Jay has said, is that on game days, he does a good job of kind of reining that back, being more of a calming presence. So it'll be interesting to see now how that plays out as head coach, if that's still sort of the same, if maybe his emotions will be riding a little bit higher. But I think that was, probably good on his part to, obviously he's very demanding of the guys he coaches, but to understand that on game days, all the work and stuff they put into it, it's time for that to kind of show up, and he's not putting pressure on it, on game days for it to happen.
Yeah, it will be kind of weird. I didn't put this in my article. I kind of wish I would have. To do a post-game press conference with not Kirk Ferentz. That's going to be really interesting to have that be Seth Wallace on Saturday. Presumably he'll be answering to a win. And if Iowa does win, Tyler, I have been asking this question now for days, and still there is no answer. And that's not a criticism of anybody. But will this win count towards Kirk Ferentz or Seth Wallace? That has not been determined. I talked to the Big Ten office even today. Talked to Matt Weitzel several times. He's getting annoyed with me about this because it's a big deal because Kirk Ferentz is chasing Woody Hayes. He needs 10 wins to pass Woody as the all-time Big Ten leader. And does this count for him or does it count for Seth? And what I was told by the Big Ten is this is up to the institution. Okay. Unless it becomes, and then the NCAA weighed in, and their guidelines say if the committee of infractions imposes a suspension, then it definitely doesn't count for the coach. But that is not what happened here. It was a self-imposed one-game deal. So should the win count or loss count for Wallace or for Ferentz? And I land on Ferentz. I think it should go to Ferentz because, as he said, it is a 52-week-a-year job. Like being the head coach is assembling this team, keeping them level. It's not really as much about game day as it is about all the preparation that goes into this game. Still, I could see an argument for Wallace too because Sharon Moore got one of the wins that he coached for last year, and Jim Harbaugh got the other 3. It's very random. It's very like it's what Iowa wants to do. I would say Kirk Ferentz would probably say he doesn't care, but I would say Iowa probably would want to give it to Ferentz. I think the right thing to do is give it to Ferentz, but I could see Wallace too. What do you think?
I feel like they're both unselfish enough where they're like both don't want it. Like Kirk is going to be like, I want Seth to take this, and Seth Wallace to have enough admiration for Kirk and knowing where he kind of stands in the echelon of wins in the record books of like wanting to give it to him. So maybe if they come to that point, you listening will get the win. Whoever you listening will get the win on your resume, or Chad, maybe, I don't know. So maybe it's bid off for an auction. I don't know.
Yeah, right. No, it's it'll be interesting. I don't know when they'll decide. I don't know. I don't think there's like a deadline. It's just up to Iowa. That's what it sounds like. So somebody will have to make that decision at some point. But I get that question. I've been getting that question constantly. So I'm trying to get you guys answers. That's why I'm not trying to be a pest. But I want to know too. I mean, I'm curious because it is an interesting thing, He's not there, so should he get the win? But it's still his team. And I don't know. Well, anyway.
They might just split it half a week. Can they do that?
If it's a loss, I mean, then we have a lot more issues than that.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
All right, so great news. Another podcast tomorrow with me and Tyler. Our Hawk Central radio show will be on the air from 6 to 7 o'clock on KX. No, we might have the podcast edition to you earlier for our text group subscribers. But stay tuned. We'll have I have my Iowa Everywhere show on Thursdays, and then we, of course, will have our post-game pod on Saturdays after the games. That time always is going to vary, Tyler, but we're going to do it. We always love doing that post-game pod. Get your 3-word headlines. Pretty much we're back to game week, so it feels good.
Yep.
Yeah, good finish. Way to go.
Well, no, right. Okay. You know what? I will.
Okay. Why don't you close us out?
Okay. Right. Well, the last thing I'll add about Cade McNamara is that it felt like the first 2 weeks of last season, you could see like the flashes. Like it was just maybe their timing was a little bit off, but you're like, if they could have, if that throw was 1 second earlier, or just a little bit, this way or that way, like they're really close. It looked like it was close, but the timing was just a little bit off. I think if Iowa had a healthy Cade McNamara all last season, as the weeks went by, you would have seen those start to click. You would have seen the timing start to get right. So my point is, if the first couple weeks this season, I don't think it's a bad thing if the timing looks slightly off. If it's just a little bit off and you can kind of see the openings and the fact that Cade is seeing the reads, making the throws, but it's just maybe a little bit off, I think that would be a good sign, honestly, of the fact that it's close to getting there. And then you hope that if he can stay healthy, it will get there. But that's my last word.
What a random closeout. We had all this structure. We had the new, the old, the different, and all of a sudden this random Cade McNamara hot take on the finish.
I don't think that was a hot take. I think that was some analysis.
I'm just joking.
But, hey, you threw the floor to me.
That was a mistake.
That's never going to happen again. I just threw away that opportunity.
Just like that Kirk Ferentz level 2 violation. Never going to happen again.
Never.
All right. For Tyler Tachman, this is Chad Leistikow. We will talk to you tomorrow on Hawk Central and on Saturday in our post-game pod. Thanks.